appointed Attorney Mackey to guide us through.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning. For 5 more minutes. I'm gonna try my best to get us out of here as close to noon as possible. And I'm really just gonna kind of give a 10,000-foot view of public comments and how that law has developed in the United States since the First Amendment was adopted back in, I think, 1781. First of all, though, I think we need to touch on the open meeting law. In Minnesota, when a government entity conducts its business at a meeting, those meetings need to be open to the public. Open meeting law does not guarantee that members of the public can comment or have opportunities to address the board, just that they be allowed to come and monitor the government business being conducted. That said, a governmental entity can create a limited public forum if it chooses to open up its meetings or a portion of its meetings for public comment. That's where we get into the First Amendment area. And just so people can, just to refresh your memory, I know you've all heard this probably 1,000 times in your lives, but I'll read the First Amendment. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievances. So that's it. Obviously, I'm here today to talk about free speech and the abridgment of free speech. Generally speaking, in public forums, traditionally public forums like sidewalks, streets, parks, people have the right to speak freely. Courts and different statutes throughout time have said that government entities can adopt reasonable time, manner, and place restrictions. But those restrictions must be content neutral, narrowly tailored to serve a substantial government interest, and leave open ample alternative locations and opportunities for speech. Examples of reasonable time, space, or time, place, and manner restrictions include limiting demonstrations to occur during the normal part of a day, not really late at night or really early in the morning, limiting noise levels, limiting the number of people that can be in a public space because of safety reasons. Those are acceptable time, place, and manner restrictions. Pretty much everything else is fair game. There are some areas that courts have recognized governments can restrict speech, but it's very limited. And the ones that have been really recognized through the courts through the years are obscenity, defamation, fraud, incitement, fighting words, and speech integral to criminal conduct. There's also some cases that talk about advertising as being outlawed in certain circumstances, but that's pretty much it. I know that people have asked me about false statements. What if somebody's up and talking about false statements? The court has specifically declined to include that among restricted, or types of speech that can be restricted by a government entity. So that's, it kind of gives you an idea of what, I mean, free speech is very well protected, and when you look at the First Amendment, it was at one of the founding principles of our nation. And so anytime a government entity looks to restrict the content or what somebody wants to say, they have to be very careful. There's a line of jurisprudence of case law throughout the years that talks about limited public forums. And that's, you know, for our purposes, when a government entity has a meeting, like an open meeting, and allows a public comment period, it's creating a limited public forum. Usually those kind of limited forums they're called limited because the limitations can be a little bit more broad than in a traditional public forum. But they have to relate to an objective governmental, or a reasonable and substantial government objective, and they need to be viewpoint neutral. So for example, when we look at our county board, we have a policy that allows people the opportunity to be heard on a board appropriate matter, and then also to speak to specific items that might be on an agenda or a hearing. That's really broad. There are other governmental entities that have limited their public comment to only things on the agenda. And as long as the comments, as long as there are no viewpoint limiting, restrictions, usually that's okay. And I just wanna give you some examples of what viewpoint limiting is. So for example, let's take our Civil Service Commission. We can say that's a limited public forum. It's a public forum that exists to handle some government interest, or government question, government business. People can come, they can watch it, and then I believe they can comment on certain specific agenda items. The subject matter limitations there is that all your comments have to be related to what's on the agenda in that meeting. Somebody can't come and say, I'm here at the Civil Service Commission and I wanna talk about capital punishment, because that's not why that entity is there to conduct business. So that restriction would be okay. Can't talk about capital punishment at a Civil Service Commission meeting. But if somebody came up and said, I wanna talk about something on the agenda and here's my viewpoint, and the government entity tried to limit that viewpoint or that speech, that would be an impermissible limitation on the content of what's going on. So I hope that's clear, that that's when you talk about a limited public forum, you can limit it to what the entity has kind of set the agenda to be, but we can't limit the viewpoints that are expressed within that forum. Some cases, you know, there have been a lot of cases as to restrictions or limitations that have been created to preserve the orderly conduct of the meeting. So one I saw was no signs in the meeting room, and that was upheld because it was viewpoint neutral and it was reasonably related to a substantial government interest of conducting a proper, efficient government meeting. But limiting what could be on those signs or what people said when they got up to talk, that would be a problem. In our case, our policy, our standing rules, doesn't really place limitations on what people can come up and talk to the board about. Basically, it's any board appropriate matter. I don't really like that phrase because board appropriate, I mean, it's subjective, it's not clear. And I think I think it's really broad. I think that if we wanted to be more specific, we could. And I think you all know that Brian and I want to update the standing rules. So if anybody has anything that they'd like to talk about relative to that provision of our standing rules or any others, I urge you to contact me. Also, if you have any suggestions for reasonable restrictions based on how we conduct our meetings or things like that, contact me as well. There have been thousands of cases decided under the First Amendment and state laws that kind of bring that First Amendment protection into the states. And so if you could pose a situation to me or a restriction, I could go research it specifically and I'd be happy to do that. It's just too hard to comment on every single case that's been decided over the years because they're so broad. But generally speaking, content-based restrictions are not allowable unless they are outside the purpose of that limited public forum. And then, you know, we can say, no, that's not allowed here. But viewpoints within those limited public forums have to be protected. So that's what I have for you. I am open for questions, but like I said, if you have specific ideas or thoughts or circumstances in mind, I urge you to reach out to me directly, and I would be happy to do research and get back to you.
Commissioner, Ashley?
Yeah, I just want some clarity on this as a board then. So how the addressing the board as a whole has been interpreted at times has been different on the board. And I know that's difficult for the community. And so based on what you're saying, and this has been my interpretation of it too. While people cannot come to the board and say specifically, I'm here to talk to you, Commissioner Grimm, about something. It is well within people's purview, their rights, and honestly what we should grant people as a county board, to be able to name commissioners, talk about the votes they've done, give perspectives, even if they're perspectives that they've given before, because that is constitutionally protected, as well as we can have the larger discussion of what's ethical and our duty as public servants. But just in terms of constitutionality, I do want clarification on that broad rule, because it's come up multiple times, and community members have been cut off during public comment because of it.
Well, what I'd like to do is refer you back to kind of what we can limit the content on. Obscenity, I had the list, obscenity. Give me 1 second. Defamation, fraud, incitement, fighting words, and speech integral to criminal conduct. If it doesn't fall within one of those very limited umbrellas, it's protected speech. And so, using me as an example, people can come up at a county board meeting and they can address the board about how they're disappointed in the way I do my work, or disappointed in a decision I made relative to a case, or anything like that. That's not defamation. It doesn't rise to the level of defamation under the law, and so that speech would be protected. And frankly, if you look at the last part of the First Amendment, part of our constitutionally guaranteed rights is to petition the government for redress of grievances. And oftentimes, an opportunity to address the board is to say, hey, I have a grievance. I want that to be redressed. So that's my comment on that, my take on it.
I know that, at least on my experience, I know that my time on the Duluth City Council was very, very much in the same view of, of transparency and civility. And that's part of it that I want, when you chair, I think that's the big thing, is try to keep a meeting running smoothly and quickly as best you can, and then the civility and transparency of the meeting. So it's gonna be different for everybody that shares, obviously, but I really like that aspect of, treating the board as a board, giving any individual 5 minutes to speak on any issue is very important to me, as everybody on this board, which I get. But at least on my side of things, the civility is super important for us, and mutual respect. I don't want somebody from a commissioner attacking somebody in the audience individually. I don't think that's appropriate, and I kind of feel the same way a little bit on that side of things as a civilian coming to the county board. I think we deserve, especially in this day and age, it's become more intense on a lot of these local governments, state, federal. Better be cautious on that, make sure that we are civil to each other as commissioners, to the public, and the public to the commissioners. So that's my frame of thought, but absolutely everybody deserves 5 minutes to speak on items on the agenda or not on the agenda. Always want to have that as an option. So it's my 2 cents on it. Commissioner?
I just have one other thing about that. I think, I agree in terms of, and I'm not sure if that's covered under fighting words or whatnot, like, if somebody, or obscenity, if, there's a list of names that we could be called, where I understand, and I would expect the chair to, and the chair under any kind of portion of our meeting to interrupt and call to our code of conduct. What I want to be careful of as a board is that we're not doing facing public contact. I think I've seen that in so many levels of local government, where somebody says something uncomfortable, something that is called an attack, when really it's just a grievance that's being brought forward. And even if people, this is part of where DEI work comes into play too, not like, it's not all of it, but there is a certain level of tone policing that gets put more on certain groups, on certain viewpoints. And I think we just have to be really careful about not getting defensive and shutting down what people are saying and being open to it because of our role as public servants, and people are accountable to the public even if we don't like how they're saying it to us. Oftentimes, some of the constituents that I've talked to who are the most ticked off, underneath it, somewhere in there, there's something, even if you say it wrong, I've said things wrong all the time, and even if you do that, doesn't mean that you're not right on the issue or that there's not a legitimate grievance. So that's just something I want to make sure we're all clear on. I'm not totally policing the public.
start with one, okay? I served this board on the Planning and Zoning Committee. And for my fellow commissioners who do not serve on the Planning and Zoning, or have not served on the Planning and Zoning Committee, I would encourage you that if you are disappointed in what you're seeing come from there, that you should attend and actually learn what the process is. And the fact that when we approve mining and gravel pits, that there's actually a very thoughtful process that we go through, starting with our director down to our planning, or our physical planning director, to the board of citizens that looks at each and every one of these applications, making certain that the zoning is proper, making certain that all of the component parts of what is a mining permit are in order before anything is issued. That's then followed up by the subsequent lawsuit. And then we have to wait. Once that lawsuit is filed, we're stuck. As a planning commission member, as anybody in the department, we can't comment. Nothing can be said because it's in court. Then, of course, they lose the court case. And then, of course, you have the subsequent appeal. Does that sound familiar to range commissioners? It should. Because it's the exact same thing that happens with every mining project that gets brought forward on the Iron Range. But gravel pits are incredibly difficult. We spend hours at planning and zoning. That's after our staff spends many, many hours before it gets brought to us. And then to hear the criticism of my fellow commissioners of that performance. Please, please take the time to educate yourself and understand that we cannot discuss things that are in court, and they usually are. We also don't discuss punishment or things that are done while we work with owners of, whether it's a gravel pit or a building or a dog kennel or whatever it is. Planning and zoning, nor commissioners who serve, or, and I say commissioners who serve because we appoint a number of commissioners to that board, we don't get to talk about this stuff because it has to go through a process. And lately, getting through that process has become next to impossible. And especially in a couple of locations. But I can assure you, they met all of the criteria, were given the permit. Are there going to be people who object? Yes, every time. Every time. We listen to them thoughtfully every time there is something that comes in front of us. And those naysayers, they run to other commissioners. While we have to sit silent, our attorneys have to sit silent, our director has to sit silent, because we know that we are going to we're either in the middle of a lawsuit, or going to be in a lawsuit, or going to be in an appeals process. So if you have concerns, please start attending these meetings. And make sure you notify administration so we don't end up with more than 3 commissioners at them. Or if somebody really enthusiastically would love to have that committee. By the way, this is the packet. This is the packet for Thursday's meeting, Planning Commission meeting. I spend more time in that Planning Commission packet than I do in a County Commissioner's packet. Usually it's twice this thick. We're having a light meeting in July. But if somebody is just so anxious to be part of this process, I would be willing to step aside and allow them to be the county board representative there. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. It's tough work. It's tough work. And our commissioners that are on that planning commission do it once or twice a month. So if we're going to hear the criticisms, please come. Please. Chair,
Yes.
if I may, I apologize. I was, after the citizens' comments, I was fully expecting someone from the Teamsters to come forward and trying to be respectful. But I do have a letter here that I have been asked to read on behalf of one of my constituents. Mr. Chair, would you like me to go up front to read it, or is it all right if I read it from here?
You can read it from here.
And this is, Mr. Chair, this is a letter to you, but again, as the elected representative from Friedenberg, or for Friedenberg, was asked to read this. Dear Mr. McDonald, Lakehead Trucking is a third-generation family-owned and operated business that has been serving the community for over 70 years. Throughout the years, we have established excellent working relationships throughout Friedenberg Township, both as a vendor and as a customer. We have enhanced our community through donations and by investing time and resources in making Friedenberg a better place to live. We take pride in our operation here in Friedenberg. We not only run our businesses here in Friedenberg, but we live here as well. To be able to continue to supply these excellent services to our community, we applied to St. Louis County and received a conditional use permit to operate a new site. We filled out the necessary permits and followed St. Louis County guidelines and procedures. Although the majority of Friedenberg Township have supported us, we have endured intense scrutiny, antagonism, and a lawsuit by certain individuals called Friends of Friedenberg, LLC. The opportunity for this group to challenge the conditional use permit had expired when they filed the lawsuit, and yet they have continued to harass us and have continued their pursuit with the lawsuit, costing us valuable time and money. Family and employees that are working and living on our own property do not feel safe because of the continued harassment. Our intention is to continue to provide excellent service and products to customers, including those living in Friedenberg Township. We are committed to following rules, and we will always promptly address any concerns that arise. And this is signed by Todd Kineski and Steve Kineski, and I would submit it to our board as part of the official record.
Chair McDonald. So I just want to say, we get lots of letters from people, and we do not commonly have commissioners read them. And particularly, it's a bit offensive to all these people who show up on a regular basis to speak to us, that somebody can send something to a county commissioner instead of coming and speaking at this board meeting, and have them read it at the board meeting. It's not a policy that, I certainly in past issues, I've gotten some wildly, strongly worded letters that might have been appropriate to read, but it has not been the policy, and it really is a dishonor to all these people who show up, and they've been showing up in out of the way places. The Kineskis can show up if they want to speak to this board, and they don't get to send something to one board member or however it came about, and then have him read it at the board meeting. That's a special privilege they're getting that others don't get. And I just feel really bad for these people who are coming, as much as it's something that they just need to show up just like everybody else. Thanks.
Point taken. Thank you, Commissioner Jewell. What's that?
Yeah,
My name
that's
is Clay Stitch.
Oh,
Okay,
Excuse-
I'd like to answer.
excuse me.
Council's question.
We're gonna go to Commissioner Nelson first.
Mr. Chair, again, I apologize that I did not read it exactly at the point that I did. I made the mistake looking out into this audience and assuming that the representative, Mr. Skoog, or one of the Teamsters was going to come forward. So I hesitated and I waited until you moved on. Commissioner Jewell, thank you for your opinion. It's your opinion. I will tell you that this commissioner has read several letters, and you are aware of that, several letters over the years that you and I have served here together. If someone asks me to read a letter, I will tell you that the Koneskis are working their tails off right now because it's that time of the year where you got to try and get everything done before winter. But the fact of the matter is, anybody can communicate with this board in any way they wish. Some of them send you letters, some of them send you emails, some of them do text messaging, some of them call me. And when I am asked as their representative, I can tell you that had I been asked to read a letter from one of the other individuals from the township, I likely would have done that. I have listened to the comments for all these many weeks as well. But again, to say that somehow the Koneskis are less important because they don't show up at our board meeting, Mr. Chair and my fellow board members, I do not believe that that is the case. I believe that everyone that communicates with a county commissioner deserves the attention of their county commissioner. And that's why I read the letter here today. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And point of order, Attorney Mackey, on public comment during this time frame.
Mr. Chair, our rules set forth the way that the meetings are supposed to be conducted. The time for public comment is at the beginning. However, the rules also give you, as the chair, the opportunity to answer questions of order and to make decisions about preserving decorum and everything else in the conduct of these meetings.
Thank you.
I would move adjournment, Mr. Chair.
There's a motion on the floor to adjourn,
So moved.
support by Commissioner Boyle. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We'll take a short break.
Road in Duluth. First off, as always, the 6464 Freeburg Lake Road permit needs to be voided. I've given you all the evidence. You guys use the excuse that we have an attorney, so you can't talk about it. No, these are facts. The attorney has nothing to do with this. This is facts. The law was broken intentionally, and you need to do your job. All of you. As for the letter that Mr. Nelson read a few weeks ago, how's that going? Have you found any allegations against us yet? Any sheriff's reports? I'm very offended at what you said about my friends and I. You read it out loud. Shame on you.
Let's,
Okay,
the
I will stop.
purpose of the,
I'd like to take a short break.
okay, thank
Can I
you.
please finish?
We'll call you back up. Personal privilege. We'll take a short 5-minute break. All right. We can reconvene. And then again, just a reminder that citizens' comments to individual commissioners or staff are not permitted. You are addressing the board as a whole. Again, we promote adherence to civility in conducting this business, and we're more than happy to hear from people. So just so aware, please no individual comments to commissioners or staff as you're addressing the board as a whole. So back to you, Ms. Bell.
Okay, moving forward. Last meeting, I talked about a site visit that was done on one of our pits, and it failed. It says excavation on the eastern property appears to be exhausted and current reclamation should begin in the area. Now, this was September 12th, 2022. Now, I gave you this stuff. It says there was an inspection, if you look at the top, November 16th, 2021. I asked for that inspection after seeing this staff visit. I wonder what that one said. There is no data for it. How do we put a date down for an inspection or site visit and there's no documents for it? As I've said before, and hold on, I got my phone out for this one because I didn't have it printed out. I said that at the Planning Commission meeting, it was Roger Scraba. He asked about the letter that Friedenberg wrote about these issues. And Donald Rigney responded. And I won't read it all, but he says, the other was reclamation going across at the end. Well, it is a requirement of the ordinance. The department does not determine when mining excavation is done in certain areas. So this is an ongoing process. So how is that from the approval of the pit when someone from the committee actually asked the question to find the truth? And in my mind, that wasn't truthful. So again, I'm asking for that investigation in this department. No township wants to take back zoning. No one does. But we also have to be able to trust the planning department in making fair decisions, in not rubber stamping, in not being afraid to change precedent on things. We are changing, so things do need to change. I've heard the comment before, you better know what district you're zoned in, because I mean, you guys are multi-use 4, so tough luck, it goes there. There's a pit in Fayette Township next to Gilbert. Before it was a pit, it was residentially zoned. The year before it became a pit, they zoned it forested land. Next year, it's now an asphalt plant. These people's lives have been ruined. So the excuse of you weren't zoned in the right area doesn't matter. It's a joke. So when people are buying their homes, they think they're safe. If I'm in residential, I'm good. No, this example right here is an example that proves no matter where you live, no matter where you buy your land, $1 million home, I don't know exactly what homes are there, but there's an asphalt plant that they can smell now forever. I don't know. They usually don't have a shelf life. They just keep going and going. So for the rest of their lives now, they invested in a home with an asphalt plant. So please, these are serious matters I'm bringing up to the table. Very serious. And I will keep bringing them up. But again, now here is an actual evidence where the planning department withheld information, and when they were asked, did not tell what I'm seeing now as the truth from this letter. I'm hearing 2 different stories. So please, get some investigation going on. Let's change up some people around this board and get things going so they are proper. Thank you.
Discussion items and report. Commissioner Nelson.
Mr. Chair, you have several items. The first, if I may, is we all received a letter from the Friedenberg Town Board as to their official position. And I certainly hope that this board can put some of that issue to bed. It is time, and the Friedenberg Town Board has clearly articulated their position. Everybody received it, and is there still consternation within that community? Yes, but it should be within that community, and it should stay within that community. The mention of the pit today, clearly that was also inspected. But we continue to hear about it here, and quite frankly, the Planning Commission is a place that I probably spend these days 50 to 60% of my time just on Planning Commission issues. But none of them are easy. They're all hard. And they're all difficult in the communities, but they all find a way of working themselves out. Mr. Chair, the second thing, and I'm going to be turning to hopefully our next year's board chair, Commissioner Boyle, and asking that that he consider appointing a small subcommittee to go through our purchasing policy. It has been approximately 18 years since we went through that purchasing policy at length. We did do some revisions several years ago, but the original three that were on that purchasing committee was myself, Commissioner Chrome, and Commissioner Fink, and we made some major revisions, and we're in need. Costs have gone up, and you may even see something in the next week or two related to P cards on a more immediate basis that we need to do some short-term adjustments to our purchasing policy in order to keep them an effective tool for our people out there. Third is something that I have contemplated for quite some time, and I want to make sure that my message comes across on our PAC TV. Having been successful in last Tuesday's election, this is my last term on this county board. But I promise for the next 4 years, I will still be working on the last day of the last month of the last year on county-related issues. But I make that statement now because I want to make sure that over the course of these next 4 years, there are individuals who have an interest in serving at the county level, that they start exploring that. Because this board needs a lot of quality folks that are willing to put in the time and energy necessary to be an effective board. So with that, Mr. Chair, that announcement is done. I did throw my signs away. There is visual evidence if anyone cares to see it. But it is really important to me that over the course of these next several years, because they go by so fast, it seemed like when I was campaigning this time, it seemed like I had just done it. Okay. By the way, it was my 8th time campaigning to be a county commissioner, 7 of which were successful. But and you might ask how that could be, but there were a lot of 2-year terms very early on in my tenure that because of redistricting and because of census and all of those other pieces. But it is still a pleasure to serve, and I look forward to the next 4 years. Individuals who come in front of this board to address us for 5 minutes at a board meeting. And we should never stop people from coming in front of the board to express their views to this board. However, I just can't, I can no longer stand by and continue to hear the lies, the innuendos, the attacks on our department director. I can take the attacks. They really kind of run like water off a duck's back to me at this point. But folks, we have a great team within our planning department. And to have somebody stand up here as if and do everything but say they represent the board. I got over 400 votes. It was run on gravel pits, and I'm still on that board. Folks, we got a letter from that board telling us that they're happy with what we did. The majority of the board speaks. Although we have differing opinions up here, at the end of the day, the majority of the board speaks. Look, the tragic events that took place up in Friedenberg Township over this past holiday weekend, I believe are largely attributed to the unending and unwielding fight over gravel pits, which, quite frankly, if we want to talk about votes, I've never gotten as many votes in Friedenberg Township as I did this past election. and overwhelming vote in Friedenberg Township for Commissioner Nelson. And the fact of the matter is I sit on that planning commission that certain members of that community find so adverse to their positions. Folks, we are doing the right things, but I will tell you that this board, I believe, still needs to take some action in terms of if people have something new to bring to this board, that is a tremendous use of our time. But for them to come forward in front of this board on a weekly basis and attempt to intimidate and bully this board into positions that this board clearly is not in, is causing issues that we have to take some accountability for. I believe we have to take some accountability for. And that is to say that somehow our response to those individuals has to be heard loud and clear. And we need to open up the beginning of our board meetings to the voices of other people who would love to come forward, but that are also intimidated and aren't willing to come forward after the hurling of accusations from a number of individuals. So we have a responsibility to all of the people in this county, not just 3 or 4 individuals. And I'm hoping that this board will start to act on that. I know that that's not an easy step, but I am certainly hopeful that we as a board take an action to make certain that other individuals have an opportunity to address our board and not be intimidated by individuals that come forward again hurling what are very much unfounded accusations at this body and at our staff. It is also extremely troubling for me to have commissioners run out to engage them and tell them how great thou art, when the fact of the matter is that clearly the representative from that district is the individual who's speaking right now. Because I have the votes over there to prove that. So when I speak for Friedenberg Township, I feel very comfortable speaking for the people of Friedenberg Township. Is that for every individual? Yes, it is, even though I may differ with them on my opinion on certain matters. But folks, when we run out and encourage this type of activity, we're attacking our own staff. And I can tell you that attacking our staff is probably the worst thing we can possibly do as a board. And allowing others to attack it is the second worst. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Leighton Sitch. I currently serve on the Friedenberg Town Board and have for 10 years. Worked hard there, done a lot of stuff. Maybe this is the last thing I'll do is work on this, but nevertheless, it is a problem. I live at 4955 Vista Bay Drive, and I'm here to address the gravel pit problem that we have. You know, they've spent many years hauling a lot of Friedenberg to downtown Duluth. And I'm sure this little 19-acre spot is not going to be the thing that's going to change the earth, but it does change a neighborhood. The neighborhood needs the protection. The one thing that I've seen that the county board has done very well is they have, in essence, worked as overdraft protection for the LTI company. They have allowed them to overdig and not be inspected. So you are overdraft protection. When I was a young man, there was a St. Louis County Federal Savings and Loan was a bank in Duluth. And they eventually went out of business because they got in the wrong business. They used to lend on houses, but eventually they decided they wanted to do something else. Maybe this is not reminiscent of what's going on here, but you are overdraft protection. That's what you do. You're allowing one company to operate lawlessly within our town, while the others have to pay the penalty. And I have become quite friendly now, since the other operators have realized what my county commissioner, the other round guy in this room, has done. It's unfortunate that this has to come to me coming to all of these meetings. I just turned, on the 20th, I turned 76 years old, okay? I don't work, I'm retired, I live a very good life. But I come here because I love my township. I know that the commissioner does not love my township, he loves gravel pits. I don't think he has done one thing to talk to any of the residents. He has only talked to the industry.
Mr. Chair.
And I find it,
I'm gonna ask that comments are addressed to this board.
Please.
And this, they've been around this long enough to know the rules. They continually violate, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Stitch, can we correct that?
I feel so sorry for Mr. Nelson that I've addressed you in these comments. Anyway, so you as a collective board and the government here have allowed this to happen and will continue. It must be a wonderful conversation that you have to say that we are going to not inspect 2 gravel pits, but we're going to inspect everybody else. How did that conversation go? Were any of you part of it? We're going to say we inspected it. We'd have one parcel code number on each one, but we didn't walk any further. We didn't go farther into that, but we could see everything that was being a problem. But we don't have any paperwork. I question your authority when you decide that you don't want to have paperwork. I'm sure Mr. Nelson at the end of this day will have a comment to make, but I appreciate it. And I do apologize for mentioning your name again in vain. Thank you.
All right, is there anyone else that would like to speak to the board on items not on the agenda?
I have a point of clarification just for future speakers. I understand that the public can't just address specifically, I'm talking to Commissioner Grimm, but votes that I make and things that I say are on the record and are on the record for each of us. So I don't believe the intent of our rule here has or has ever been that the public cannot state facts about what happens on a commission or, actions that were taken by a specific commissioner. That would seem to cross a line to me. So I just want to make that clarification.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak? Please.